Hey everybody, what's up? How y'all doing today? Alright, get settled here. Make a video. This is coming from my brain, from my mind, my thoughts, and converting that into video form so somebody can come and watch this video down the line. And that still amazes me to no end. Just the fact that we're so connected. And in that connection, we've developed a very different sense of each other. Now, I can only speak for myself here, so forgive me if I put out any blanket statements or generalizations about people or society in general. But from where I stand, my observations over the last 5 years, let's say, online, have given me a much deeper and richer understanding of how people's minds operate in comparison to mine, as to the best that I can at least infer or assume. And there's a lot of assumptions that go on about how other people think. But the crucial aspect to it, or what's the most important part of this, even thinking about these things, is the more we understand about each other in our world, the easier it is for us to function in it. It's just like any field. Picture yourself in any education field. If you want to take on a particular scientific career, let's say you want to do like water testing or, biological, experiments with very specific plants or animals, let's say, then you have to be schooled in that. And if you're missing basic components to it, you can jump on it and have all the motivation and push behind you to succeed, and without the proper information given, you will not succeed. Because there will always be peers around you who have taken the time to educate themselves on the right plan of action, knowing that if they mix these two compounds, then it will cause an explosion, for example. It's the exact same with our moods and our attitudes. One person can sit and say, well, that's all great and dandy that this person's happy, but I'm better off being an ornery bastard. I'm much happier in my life to just be isolated and be alone. And that might be true for some people. But just getting the general sense of how people operate, most people want love in their life. They want emotion. They want connection. And if they don't get that, then they will go anywhere else to get it. And this is what's brought us to addiction. And I wasn't going to even mention addiction in this video. It wasn't actually a part of it, but it fits in perfectly because I was going to mention religion, and then it reminded me of how yesterday I had intended to make a video about religion versus addictions. Not versus, but rather the similarities between the two. The idea that we're unsure about ourselves. All of us. Now, I can say that as a blanket statement, and that would be one of those blanket statements that I, give the disclaimer about at the beginning. I am pretty sure that every single one of you out there who's watching this right now has at some point in your life doubted yourself and looked down on yourself and said, I could have done this better, or even something as simple as, what should I really be doing? Or, am I fulfilling my lot in life, or my goal, or my mission? In fact, somebody I was watching this morning mentioned that when we talk about life purposes or life goals, how there are people out there who will tell you that there is a purpose for human life, as if every human has this same purpose in mind. And often this leads back to religion, which is why it was such a crucial issue. Most of us who are born into this world, all of us born into this world, have to be taught what matters and what's important. And then we get into what they would call programming, societal programming. And this is looked and frowned upon right now by many people, as the idea that we're all programmed, that we've been told to believe this and told to believe that, and that we've created these slave humans. But in reality, it's what else is there? This is a very difficult one to express, what I'm trying to get at there, but what else is there without programming? If it wasn't programming by those around us, it would be programming by the natural surroundings. If we lived with wolves, we might act like a dog. If we were raised by primates, we might act more like a primate, which we do anyway, but you know what I'm getting at. We mimic those around us, and just like feral children have been found living with wild animals and tend to display those behaviors, we humans surround ourselves with people who display particular behaviors, and we take on that as our own. So if we're surrounded by many people who are in very loving attitudes and have great personalities and they actually care about one another, this is what leads people to want to start communes. It's not so much, it's more of an escape from the rest of the people and realizing that humans are going to be how humans are going to be. And it's not going to change because we want a utopian society. But we can choose to remove ourselves from a lot of it and surround ourselves with people who we love and respect and who love and respect us. And it's a very crucial aspect. I mean, it's the most crucial, love. I mean, and people will say love is the answer, and love is the answer, but that doesn't do any good because it's just like having the answer to a complicated math problem. You still have to understand how the problem operates. And likewise, you have to understand how to apply love. If you use the idea of love, which is a subjective thing, but there is a feeling that comes along with it that may become attractive to some people, and they may become addicted and attached to love and connection to other people. It may become, those are the clingy people, or people who play the victim, or people who just can't think for themselves. So there's a balance that has to be played with understanding ourselves and understanding others. And I think understanding other people is very important. So, I'll take a vape. Think about it here. Make sure the camera's still going. Good. It's right at 7:19. What do you know? For the things that we can't learn, or that others can't teach us, such as, what is God? Let's just say as an example, and I'm not saying there is or isn't a God, because I'm beyond that. I don't argue for or against religion or beliefs anymore, but I do believe that religion is often used as a crutch and an addiction of sorts. It's so pious, let me say, it's not so pious, I should say, many people use religion to act pious under the mask or the guise of being humble. And saying, well, I'm humble, I live by God's word. Oh, but you believe that? Well, you're a fucking idiot and you're going to hell. That's the type of attitude that just, it goes nowhere. But I would like to compare for a moment religion and drugs and kind of at least try to kind of confirm what I was getting at so people don't misunderstand that connection there. We do drugs in this society, but it's not like, I should say, the amount of drugs that are consumed, and this is a very open subject, of course, what we define as a drug. I'm talking about mind-altering substances or anything that puts us in a different frame of mind. Many people consume drugs that change their outlook, and I'm talking about alcohol too. I'm talking about tobacco. I'm talking about anything that we take to change our demeanor or to relax or whatever it might be. Our society has treated drug addiction like a disease. The problem with the disease is that you can't cure a person of cancer by locking them in prison. Okay? If a person's mindset is causing their illness, that can even compound the problem. And usually it is mindset with addiction. So if you get cancer, develop a cancerous tumor, you can't say, well, it's all mindset. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who will say that we create our own sicknesses. Often that's just bullshit. Being exposed to something that can cause cancer may cause cancer in a person. Locking them away doesn't do any good because we know that it needs to be treated and it's not their fault. Whereas addiction, we see them as the individual's fault. We place blame on this person. We place blame on them for being addicted. And then we place blame on the drug dealers for supplying it. Not even stopping to realize that drug supplies will always exist as long as, it doesn't matter how many walls we build. It was like Trump said the other day. He said, as soon as we get that wall built between U.S. and Mexico, we're going to stop 100% of the drugs coming into this country. And I just said, what the fuck reality do people live in? The addiction, the opiate crisis in this country comes from within. Okay? It's a byproduct of the society and the ills that come with it. And addiction being treated like, for what it is. It's an escape from reality quite often. And that's why, what I meant about connecting it with religion. That often religion is also escape from reality. And I'm not going to say that either one of them should be forbidden, or, and this is why when people say we need to ban drugs or stop drugs, to me that's just the same as saying stop religion. And they're very similar to me personally, in the likes that trying to just say stop this and stop that has never worked for anything. You have to get down to the depths of why we think the way we do, why we feel the way we do, why are people upset. And with addiction, there's a lot that's been learned about why we're addicted to things and how the brain operates, the reward system. We understand a little bit about neurochemistry, but the biggest observation we can make, you can leave science out of the equation, just look at people's personal lives, look at the situations that we encounter and why we end up doing the things that we do, and then realize it's our separation from one another that causes many of our addictions and many of our mental illnesses. The idea that we are either beaten down by society or that we are over-propped up by society and we develop an ego, like certain people in office. And you have to have an ego almost to get to that point, because humility really gets you nowhere. And then you get to this dog-eat-dog world where people say, look, you can be kind and talk about love all you want, but the reality is that you got to cut throats and get what you want. And many people believe this, and many people are taught to think this way. So it's not always their fault. And a good example would be a guy like Donald Trump. The poor fella grew up with a dad who was all about money, who was all about success. And when your parents impress that upon you, you've been programmed to believe that that's what matters in life. And it's very difficult to break away from that program. And maybe that's really kind of the crux of this, or the pinnacle, whatever, the peak of this argument or discussion is, well, what do we do about, well, make sure the camera's still going again here. Yeah. How do we deal with the situations that we encounter? Sure, that's an issue. Let's say that you have a loss in your life. You lost a loved one. And this happens to everyone. This is one of the things that we share. Everything's going just fine, and you have this routine, daily routine, and then all of a sudden you lose someone in your life, or your house burns down, whatever it might be. You have to be mentally prepared to deal with these changes if they come. But you can never be mentally prepared completely to deal with any situation. It's like, the person who prepares a bomb shelter for a nuclear war and instead a flood comes through and floods it out. Or, people who prepare for an apocalypse, but it's the wrong kind, that kind of stuff. Prepping, in that sense. It's the same way in our mental lives where we think, okay, because as a former, what you might call prepper, or a person who wanted to be prepared for any disaster, I would store stock dried food and got these water reservoirs and would store water. And one day, it just kind of clicked. I realized what I was doing. That I was buying into the hype of a belief system that preparing physically will create a sense of mental well-being. And it does to an extent, if you believe that, let's say, anything could happen tomorrow. It's true. But you hit a realization that you'll never know what's going to come until it comes. Have some dried food, have some water, set it aside, and be done with it. Because mental preparation was the one that I learned was the most important. Because no matter how much stuff I have, being mentally ready is the most crucial point. And it's the same way with anything in life. Like, no matter how much you know about something, or how on top of a game you are if it's not serving you in your daily life. If you're not benefiting from it and gaining something from the experience and growing from it, then it doesn't really serve much, and we become neutral, or we idle. And idle is what we would call sloth. And I would say that I am guilty, because maybe I'm at a point in my life right now where I'm starting to see that I'm keeping the wheels turning and I'm moving forward. I'm raising a family. I have my herb business, and I've been trying to build that up, and I'm trying to do something, but I still sit back and look at myself and my life and say, you could be doing so much more or better, and kind of beat myself up over it. And that's a little bit of insecurity. So I can admit that I have a little insecurity, and by doing that, it takes a weight off of my shoulders, because I don't have to hide behind a mask. Because I know that every one of you has insecurities as well. And that's something we can come together on. Those insecurities are what drive us to have addictions, are what drive us to sometimes be overly violent or overly victimized. And there are a lot of violent people out there. There are a lot of angry, hostile people who have been hurt by this world and are taking it back out on others around them. And if we let them represent the whole of humanity, we think that humans are this corrupt species that's just out to get each other. Let me put it this way. When a person wants to justify actions that we know are incorrect, they will point to the most extreme examples of humanity to justify it. If we want to justify having a dictator in a little country, let's say, the dictator would say, well, sure, you can have freedom and democracy, but look at what happened in this country with democracy. And that's a fallacy, but it's using an example, and many fallacies are used in day-to-day life to try to justify being a certain way or doing a certain thing. And people just go along with it, like we're mindless sometimes. It's because people have learned how to tap into that groupthink that we have. And if you're the one who wants to stand aside and say, no, that's not right, everyone gives you the evil eye. You're the one who's what you might call the rabble rouser or the troublemaker. I guess I'd rather be a rut in the road than a cog in the wheel. But at the same time, I have to be part of the whole, because they're all part of the same system. Every one of us, and every human, every animal, every plant on this earth, is just, the connections are just amazing when you look at it and realize that regardless of whether you believe in evolution, believe in creationism, regardless of whether you believe in an afterlife or not, whether you believe this is all an illusion, here we are. And making the most of these years that we have here is what's important to me, in my opinion. And that's not just a selfish motive. That means for those around us too. But ultimately it is selfish, because nobody's going to be there when you're, when you're at your worst in the depths of your mind, you're the only one that's there. People can hug you and coddle you and say it's okay, but really it doesn't do much good if our own minds can't really get over the whatever we have going on. So we have to be strong. We have to be able to fight off these bad feelings. When somebody dies in our life, we have to be able to cry and then move on and say that's just how it goes. Everyone's going there. But for some people, they carry that the rest of their lives. One death of a friend when they're young, they never get over it. And it just shows how connected we really are and how important human life really is to one another. And it's easy to see the pestilence, the disease, the wars, the mass murders, and genocide going on around the world and think, this place is horrible. But it's not. It's a symptom. But it's not, the whole thing isn't a disease. Life just amazes me that it exists at all. And I don't really know how to express that. At least once a day I sit back and go, wow, matter. Atoms and molecules coming together for some unknown purpose. Why do things bond together the way they do? And it just, it's amazing to be alive, and bringing it down to the simplicity of life. It's amazing to work on ourselves, and that we even have the capacity to acknowledge that we are conscious beings, and that we can step back and look at ourselves from the outside. It's something that helps me grow. And so Love rules, whatever. Life's good. What do you, don't know how to really finish this one. But do I ever? So hold that thought. Namaste.